Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to the January 10th meeting of Van Wert City Council. We'll open with Reverend Pastor Keith Stoller for the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Heavenly Father, we are very, very excited to open up this new year of City Council and the administration meetings. We're very, very excited, dear God, about the new folks on the council, and for our new president, Jerry Mazer. We ask, dear God, as these new folks begin this new year, we pray a special anointing of wisdom and understanding. The Father, they would not tackle their new responsibilities with fear, but with trust and reliance upon you and your Holy Spirit to provide wisdom and guidance each and every meeting. Lord, we love you. We love the way that you have cared for us as a community. We ask, dear God, not only for this meeting, but for all city officials as this new year begins, that your blessing would fall upon every city worker, every city administration person, and our council members, as well as the city fire department and the police, the state patrol, our sheriff's department, dear God. We realize that each one of these positions are ministry opportunities. And so we pray your blessing, dear God, upon each one of our public servants. We thank you again for this privilege. We thank you for our Lord Jesus Christ, and it's his name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Prior to calling the roll, I'd like to introduce our new council members. Julie Moore, stand up, please, and Dave Steinert are new to the council, as is Judy Bauer, but unfortunately Judy Bauer is ill and she had to depart. Thank you. Okay, please call the roll.
Mr. Marshall?
Here.
Mr. Callis?
Here.
Ms. Bowers? Mr. Egler?
Yeah, here.
Mr. Stinnett?
Here.
Mrs. Moore?
Here.
Mr. Davis?
Here. Yeah, we do. We need a motion for Judy.
I'll make that motion.
Need a second? Need a second. Marshall. To excuse Judy Bauer from the meeting.
All right.
Okay.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Okay, everyone received the agenda for this evening's meeting. Any additions, changes, or corrections? Any additions? No? Okay,
Move to accept as written.
looking for a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Okay. Minutes, December 27th meeting are in your possession. Are there any additions, corrections to the minutes of the 27th?
Move to accept as written.
Second by Jeffrey.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Okay. Comments and communications. We have Stacy Adams, Executive Director of the Economic Development Corporation, with us this evening for a brief summary of her activities and what's going on in economic development.
Thanks very much. Certainly appreciate it. In front of the group tonight is going to be legislation for CRA applications for 3 projects that we have. First of all, we have Van Wert Forward 1 LLC. The investment is $26 million. We have VWERT 2 LLC. That actually is for the spec building that is going in at Vision Park. That's a $6.5 million investment. And then we have MBK LLC. That is related to the expansion of custom assembly That is a $5 million investment. All three of those were approved from the group, the board, and presented to council tonight for your approval for a 90% tax abatement for 10 years on each one of those projects. And President, I think the rest of it, I'm going to hold until we get to economic development, but are there any questions about any of those projects? Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Under communications, we received a letter from the Community Reinvestment Board. They met on December 22nd, 2021. Present were Mark Schum, Stacy Adams, Kathy Malone, Mark Bagley, Bill Marshall, and Rick Turner. Others present were Bill Lawson, Mike Keiser, Jerry Robinson, and Seth Baker. They're the interested parties in those CRAs. The board approved all three of the CRAs for further action by the council. We'll move on that when the time comes. We look to the Honorable Mayor Ken Markloff for the administrative report.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to welcome those who return.
We skipped the council part of communications and petitions.
Okay, well,
And the community part.
trying to move this meeting along for Jay. He wants to make it.
I want to watch the game too, but
All right, we have communications
from council.
from council. Okay, go ahead.
Anyone?
Had two or three people contact me concerned about the enforcement of the ordinance with the cars parking in grass. Their concern was, is this going to be an issue during holidays or during family events to where sometimes they do park in the grass for that occasion?
Defer to the law director.
On a temporary basis, no. This would be a situation where, because one, the way the procedure would work is a door hanger would be received. If it's a party, okay, by the time the officers would come back, they'd probably be gone anyway, because they don't come back the same day. They would come back at a later date or several days later. It's an ongoing situation, okay? If they were to give a door hanger and they give a citation the same night, obviously I would take a long look at that before any enforcement action in court. So that's the best. I think
No,
does that help clarify,
And that's
Jeff?
what I kind of thought, says that that's a short-term event, but they were
That
just
shouldn't-
worried that, that when that happens,
Given that hypothetical, I don't see that being a problem.
This is going to be in my report, but we are doing 10-day notices for rubbish, weeds, grass, and maintenance of property. We're no longer doing the warnings for cars parked on the grass. But I assure you there'd be discretion taking for someone having a holiday party out looking for that type of, violation. Yeah, I'll speak to the police about that. And the no cars on grass also means trailers, recreational vehicles, and campers, so we want to make sure that. But I guess, if you don't mind, this is part of my report, but I wanted to make it clear that we are giving notices to people. There's been a lot of discussion that police are just giving tickets and nobody had any idea it was coming, and that's not the case when it comes to the maintenance of property thing. And we're not banging people for toys in the yard. Toys is not a citable offense that we're giving a ticket for. It's just in the definitions of things you can't pile in the yard, or get too much of it becomes a violation. So I know I'm not really worried about what they're saying on the internet, but I know a lot of people are checking that out, and I don't want information taken from there to think that it's the facts. So people are warned before they are summoned into court. Would you agree, Law Director? Mr. Law Director?
Okay.
Yeah.
He agrees and I agree, but warnings have been going out for the last several years that I know of.
Exactly. We were given grass parking warnings, before the holidays.
Okay, where were we on this? Any other comments or communications from the council? We asked for this. We asked from the public too?
Yes, the public.
Public.
Yes, Mr. Davis.
Jerry's already said my name. My name's Mark Davis, 402 South Tyler Street. I'd like to welcome the new council members. I'd like to welcome Jerry as president of council. The rest of you know me. I'm a thorn in your side, and I'm going to be a thorn in yours. We've been going through ordinances, rewriting them, changing them, and man was here, I wasn't here, I was sick last council meeting. He had been cited for parking his truck on the street. Problem is, ordinance 7614 and also the parking lot ordinance 7613 are unenforceable by the city at this time because in E of 7614, the safety service director shall cause appropriate signs to be placed. Never seen a sign that says you can't park heavy on the street. Same with the parking lots in 7613. I don't know where you would appropriately put a sign to tell somebody that they can't park their truck on the street, but it makes your ordinance unenforceable because there's no sign. Now if they give them warning and tell them you can't park there, then give them a ticket, well, that's a different game. That's one of the things I want to address. And then I have some safety issues. I was kind of kicking them with the safety director and Bill. The ordinances haven't kept up with technology, as you all know and you all agree. One of which is I spoke with Bill, your ordinances have no search engine. So in order to find if you're going to be in violation, there's hundreds of lines of stuff to read. Makes it really hard. That's one thing. When this is a safety issue is next. Technology of motion detecting porch lights, backlights, yada yada. I am light sensitive. I know other people who are light sensitive. When one of these porch lights flashes on and you're driving down the road and drives I don't know how strong they are, but they blind you from 300 feet away. I can't even see to turn on my street when that thing happens to be knocked on. Maybe we need an ordinance. That's why I feel it's a health and safety for Bill to limit the range of those to your property. I run a 150 watt LED bulb in my night light. I can barely see the edge of the street from it. These are blinding me from 300 feet. One of the examples is 409 South Race Street. Hers literally shines straight down the street. It's like having somebody with their high beam lights shining in your eyes. And then 701 Urban, which is Urban and Race, hers comes on when you're driving down the street, and it'll either scare you, or if somebody else trips it first, it can blind you. You have a question, John?
I do. Do you, without, and I will go and look at them, Mark. I've not.
You have to go, well, that's just it. I may be one of the few people that notice it.
No, but I definitely think it's something I need to, I'll take a look at.
But I couldn't find an
Recall
ordinance
that,
addressing it.
I don't think there is. And I'll go through the ordinances as well. And I have some conversations I need to have with American Legal on some other things. I'll talk to them about
Put the search engine on?
search capabilities.
Yeah.
And if it's possible, that sort of thing. How do you, are these lights, are they at a certain level? Are they like up at the top of the garage, or like at the peak?
Yeah,
Okay.
they shine for houses and houses. They're not shining on people's property.
Got it.
A second,
You said 409,
409 South Race and 701, that's just one of my normal routes that they constantly catch me.
you said 701 East Urban?
Yeah, which is the corner of Race, and her lights actually shine on Race Street.
Got it.
Another safety issue that I have is the LED signage that's proliferating all over the place. Light sensitive, 1,000 lumens, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 lumens coming out of these signs, flashing in your eyes at night. Now, Ameriprise is a really good example. You come around that corner and their logo, their branding is a pure white sign with blue lettering. They literally would blind us. I stopped and spoke with Ameriprise, and they turned them down as far as they could, and it's 300% better. But on that same corner, you look to the left because you want to make a right-hand turn. Here's Casey's massive blinding sign at night. How did Casey's ever get away with putting that sign there? There were people complaining about the sign at the old car wash because it was 10 feet too close to the road and it's 20 feet in the air. And Casey's can put this, I know there's an ordinance dealing with you can't have a bush more than 3 feet tall within 30 feet of the intersection, and Casey's was allowed to put this sign there. Maybe somebody could get them to turn that sign down. I haven't stopped to talk to them yet. And that brings up my third safety concern. This is a personal concern, but I know other people deal with it. Bushes within your visual range at the intersection. Franklin and Sycamore, Franklin and Main both have bushes. The one at Sycamore Street is on city property, right there at the telephone pole. By the time you get up to where you can see, this bush is in your road. It's not quite as bad because it's winter, but you still, even in the daytime, can lose cars in that bush.
On Sycamore and Franklin, you're saying?
Sycamore and Franklin, right? It's literally attached.
In the right of way?
Yep, on the post.
A sign or a bush?
A bush. And then at Main and Franklin, the bush is right in the corner of the guy's lot, and it's about yay tall. I mean, these are ones that are actually dealt with in ordinances, but I know there's literally dozens and dozens of city vehicles driving around and council members. Am I the only person that notices these? I mean, you gotta stop 30 feet behind the stop sign to be able to see down the road.
I think we understand your point.
Yeah.
So,
And
that's,
Mr. Davis, I see that the Safety Service Director's taking copious notes, as the Law Director, and we'll look into those items.
and I was spoke to Bill earlier, and he said this would be just a fine place to bring it up, so.
And that's exactly what you should do. Thank you very much. Mr. Jarrett.
Yeah, I noticed the same search feature not working as well, but what I do is I just create my own PDF and use PDF editor to do my searching. I mean, it's workable, but it was nicer when it had the search.
Yeah, that would be good.
Again, I have some conversations I need to have with American Legal about some other issues. I will, in the process of that, I will at least bring it up and find out the situation with all that.
I'm on the website right now, and I'm searching through everything,
Yeah, I
just
put
with
in
like
parking and it came right up.
typed rubbish, and it brought back 40
Where do you
results.
type it at?
Right at the top, there's a search.
Where it
You click
says
on
search.
search, and it brings up another window.
Mark, when
And then
did you
just
get your
search whatever you
computer,
want.
Mark?
Huh?
When did you get your computer?
My computer is a year and a half old.
Yeah, it's,
Browser.
I'm on Chrome, I mean, that's pretty widespread.
No, sir.
I can show you when we're done, Mark.
No, on the Code of Ordinances,
I have
there's
no
a word,
problem going
it says
down
search.
Yeah, it's right there. I mean, we can, I'll show you.
Clicking on the right, scanning over stuff, and I don't find anything that says search. I
Yeah.
find notebook, download, yada, yada, yada. but I don't find-
Mr. Davis, why don't you get with, or Mr. Davis here
got it right
after the meeting, and we can get that
Yeah,
straightened out
let's
for you.
go on. I
Thank you.
made my comments.
Mark, can you see that from there? I'm not sure.
I'm half blind in the first place.
That's the problem with those lines.
Be honest about it.
I just
No,
wondered,
I
so
understand.
there's the word search right there, those look on that.
Well, that's different than it comes up on mine. Now, that may be my computer, so I have to work with that. Thank you, that's,
Okay, well, I can't solve all his problems either, but,
Got that one taken care of, didn't you, Mayor?
well, that will make it easier.
but I also would suggest, since council only meets every 2 weeks, and it's not like they're gonna go down and trim a bush, if you find something you think's out of whack, call the office.
Well, I would think with everybody who runs around that they would
But
notice.
since they didn't, you telling them is just taking 2 weeks longer than it needed to.
Yep.
If you just call the office between 8 and 4:30.
I've done that, and I've
Just saying.
not got adequate answers at times.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. That's good.
Thank you,
All
Mr.
right.
Fraser. Speak
Any
up
other
in
comments
touch for us now.
Any other comments from the,
I just have a question. When ordinances are changed, how long does it take for that to be updated so that when it hits the airwaves, if you will?
You mean to get onto the top of my head? I don't know. It's another conversation I will have with the American Legal Publishing people, because there's some things that need to be discussed. They've been trying to get a hold of me, and I need to respond back to them, and that will happen.
I can ask him that question too when I send the ordinances tonight, so.
Okay.
See what they think.
Thank you.
any other comments from the floor? No? Hearing none, we'll go on to Honorable Mayor Marquardt.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to welcome back everyone who's continuing in their terms, and also welcome those who are new to the room. Appreciate the next 2 years. The 3 items listed there are all informational kind of carryovers from discussions that we'd had in the last couple months. So might be, new for the new people and reminders for the others, but all three of those are positions that are appointed by council. So you've got total authority over those three spots. And a couple of details on that. The first one, the Airport Authority Board of Trustees, that's a 2-year term. So that would go through December 31st of '23. The Woodland Union Cemetery Board is a 3-year term that ends this coming December. Joel Penton already served the first 2 years of it. That one is supposed to be a member of council. The third one, the Energy Special Improvement District, is an open-ended appointment with no expiration date other than if council chooses to kick that person off. So the first one, the airport and the EZID, can be anybody you want. The cemetery one is supposed to be a member of council. And those are the expiration terms. So I want to bring that to your attention to deal with as you see fit.
We'll do that.
And that's all I have tonight.
Can we nominate somebody for these positions tonight, or?
You can if you want. I mean, that's up to
I'll
council.
deal with that in a few minutes.
But, oh, okay, yeah, that's the end of my report.
Yeah, thank you. And for the Safety Service Director?
I talked about rubbish and trash. I guess the only other thing for Mrs. Moore's benefit, you get to take an ordinance all the way from inception to passing tonight. There's an ODOT ordinance. It's the fourth one from the bottom. Sorry, I don't have the number. But
I think it's 06.
yes.
05.
05. We're awarded grants through ODOT. They require specific legislation that we pass that commits us to doing the project and what we're going to pay for the project. So, and then they like to give us about 10 to 15 days to get it passed and back to them in Columbus. So we need to take that ODOT ordinance through tonight because the Bonnenwood Skier Road project's going to get bid out here in a few weeks at the state level, and that'll be a construction project beginning in the spring. And that's really all I have to report.
Okay, are there any questions for either the mayor or the Safety Service Director? From the council? From the audience? Okay. We'll go on to committee reports. Or no, first we'll have Martha. Administrative report under auditor's report.
Thank you, sir. First thing I have is a then and now, which I posted these on the Google Drive, and you should find them under shared with me. This is a then and now, although I left out the word now in the title of it. For the benefit of the new council people, a then and now is a procedure that we go through because technically, no one is allowed to spend money until I've certified that there's money available. Anytime there's $3,000 that's spent that wasn't approved in advance, it has to go to council. And I'm asking tonight that we approve an invoice from Hench & Associates for $77,571.96. This is from a municipal court project. It's a grant project. It's a reimbursing grant project. And due to their budget, they were unable to encumber the funds in 2021. So the invoice was dated prior to the time they could encumber the funds, which is what we do when a purchase is approved. We set the funds aside saying that they're available for this project. So a then and now just says that we had the money then when the purchase was made, and we have the money now when the invoice is due. So that's why this is coming to council. There's nothing wrong with it, or there's really nothing to discuss about it. The purchase has already been made. So Mr. Egler will ask for that to be approved in his report. The other thing I have is the bank reconciliation for the month of December, which again should be available to you as a shared with me document. The first page of that bank reconciliation just shows the balance that I carry on the books, which is currently $16,040,057.56, and we have that same amount in the various bank accounts and investments. The next page of that report is a statement of cash position. The city's monies are all in these funds that are listed there on the left, starting with 100, going to 999, which I will prepare for the next meeting, just a list for the new people so that you can get an idea of what the revenue source is. But it's like every revenue source more or less has its own pocket of money. When I give my financial reports, we're mostly concentrating on the general fund, which is Fund 101. That's where income tax dollars go, 1% of the income tax dollars go. The general fund funds the police and fire departments, the parks department, and the administrative offices. Streets department and utilities have their own funding sources, but the general fund is always our fund of concern, so that's why we look at that more closely. So the requirement is that all funds have a positive balance at the end of the month. So on this cash position report, the column unexpended balance, that's the balance in the funds at the end of the month, and this report reflects that all had a positive balance. The other report that I give out is a revenue year-to-date comparison, just comparing the revenues year-to-date to where we were at that same point last year. So this is for 2021. We did end the year up taking in $429,000 more than we took in the prior year. We had a few areas where we collected less than what we had collected the prior year. But overall, we ended 2021 far better than we had anticipated we were going to. So going forward, we'll be looking at those comparisons again to see how 2022 compares to 2021. So that's, I guess, all I have. If anyone has any questions.
Any questions from the council? No questions from Mr. Jarrett?
Did we actually maintain the 10% growth over last year?
We did, hey, Ken, you did that calculation, didn't you?
11%?
That's what,
Yeah. Roughly.
Income tax?
yes. Well, no, yeah, income tax, yes.
11.2 over last year, and it was 5%, $556,000 more than 2019.
And maybe even closer to 7%. Maybe, I don't have it.
That was 7% more than 2019, that's exactly right.
Right
Yeah.
around there.
Any other questions?
That's excellent.
Thank you. Okay, law director's report, please.
Thank you. A couple of things. I know we've talked a bit about these rubbish ordinances and that. We've had our first round of people come through court. It's been orderly. There were people that were upset about everything, and I think the judge handled everything very well in discussing the matters, and the cases were handled judiciously and most of them got taken care of that day. I think the people that came through court have a better understanding of what we're trying to accomplish. So I only expect that to improve as the communication keeps going back and forth between the police department, the law director's office, and the public. I think as that continues, I think we'll all get a better understanding of what we all, of where everything should fall and what expectations should be. Just on another note, court costs in municipal court have gone up. They went up $40 from $95 to $135. This is the first raise in court costs in over a decade. Actually, I think it's the first time the judge has raised court costs since she's been on the bench, and she's been on the bench longer than I've been law director, so that's at least 10 years. So just so people understand that when you hear a fine that and you hear court costs are at $135. So whatever fine is over and above that. Just that's more of a public service announcement, just so people know what to expect. Other than that, again, you have questions on any of these things that have been happening, please contact my office. We'll do our best to communicate with people. I mean, my goal with these junk and rubbish cases is not to generate a windfall of money for the city. It's to get properties cleaned up, and I'm willing to work with people, and I prefer to work with people. We get much better long-term results if we do that. So, again, contact my office, and we'll try to have a dialogue with everybody. Thank you.
Any questions from council for the law director?
Just
Yes, sir.
thought it might be helpful if you could maybe just explain to new council members how the ordinances get numbered.
Okay, yes. And a couple other, and I'll add something else for the new council members as well. When you look at there's three numbers with dashes in between. Like you look at the first one is 2201-001. 22 obviously is for the year 2022. 01 is for the month in which it was prepared. 01 being January. And then the last three digits is numerical from the beginning of the year, like the first ordinance prepared for the year 001 all the way up till whatever number we end the year at. Most years we end up between probably 75 and 100 is a pretty typical legislative year for ordinances. That's how that works. Have any of you had trouble receiving the ordinances on your Chromebooks? And I had your emails. I tried to email them out to you earlier today to review. I typically do that the Wednesday before. I did not have your emails until Friday afternoons. I didn't get them out to you till earlier today. That I will try to do better about getting those to you sooner. Are those for the two of you? Are those email addresses the ones you want sent to the week before, so you have a chance to review it and ask questions of me on, because feel free to email me questions on any of those, especially your first year running through the gauntlet of stuff. You're going to have a lot of questions because I would say at least a third of the legislation we do is kind of the same thing every year. So by the second year, you're like, okay, I understand what that is. We've gone through that one or two or three times by the time you get into your second year on council. But the first year, you're going to have a lot of questions, and that's totally understandable. And please send them, and I'll do my best to give you as concise a response as I can. And if my answer is I don't know, it means I'll get you an answer as soon as I can.
Thank you.
Okay? Not a problem. Not a problem.
Questions from the gallery?
Actually, two. There's a lot of things that I don't even deal with when I read it online because there's no context. So throwing all of those out. Following up on what Dave said about a warning is issued first. Is that always the case for property complaints?
Yes.
Okay. So,
It's required.
okay.
Now, so we're clear on a lot of them. It's one written notice or door hanger annually. So if you get a door hanger in January about an issue, you may, and then you have a reoccurrence in July, August, or September.
Of the same issue.
Of the same issue. Correct. It has to be the same issue.
Okay, so the criteria is if you're dealing with the exact same problem as before and you got a warning that year, it's going right to court.
Yeah, if it's like, as long as it's the same calendar year.
Okay.
Okay?
I wanted to clarify, that was one of the things I was questioning.
Okay, and that's a fair question, and that's something that I think the public does need to understand. I mean, it's not going to, like, you have a junk issue in your yard in January, okay? And you get a notice first, and it gets resolved. And you get 6 months down the road, you get to July or August, you have a junk issue in your yard again. That might go straight to court.
Okay.
But if it's January and then it's the following January, you will get a notice each time.
Okay. One other question.
Sure.
When they contact you and ask you for more specific information by email, do you have the photos the police provide to give you that?
If I don't, I will request them.
That was one of the requests for more transparency.
Yeah, that's
Some of
fine.
it's clear as mud.
I understand, and on one of the cases, that ended up in court last Thursday, that happened. And we went through that, and we had an issue that the person that had a violation sent one set of photos, and then the police department had a multitude more of photos, which...
Wider context.
Correct. Much wider context. And that was how one of the cases, how we looked at and resolved one of the cases, so.
Yeah, I think I know which one you're talking about.
And then that's the situation. And if I don't have all the information, I'm certainly not going to give you a complete answer, nor should I. So I will, sometimes when the first thing that's sent to me is, I may get a request somewhere along the line for more information, okay? And a lot of times, before I respond to you, my first question might be to the police department. Because I usually don't see the photographs
Until it goes to court.
till it goes to court. So if you send me something and it hadn't gone to court yet, I'm going to have to request the photographs,
Okay.
okay? So that might be a delay of a day or so before I get them back, before I get back to somebody.
The VW law director's email is still an official contact?
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
Thank you. I have just one comment for clarity, Law Director.
Sure.
The process is a door hanger or some warning prior to any citation.
And that warning would be in writing, correct?
All right, and then there's a period of 10 days between warning and citation, or less, or more?
10 days to get the property in compliance.
Okay.
Now, obviously, if it's a situation where it may take longer than 10 days, I think communication between the property owner and the city would have to happen at that point.
Yeah.
And that would be handled on a case-by-case basis.
Well, I don't think they're watching the calendar down there and say, okay, 10 days passed on this one, let's go give them a ticket, you know?
And no, that doesn't
I think
necessarily happen.
we have to be fair about this thing, and if they get a warning, that seems to me to be fair warning to clean it up or do something. Now, what's the financial impact? It's a $100 fine for these that go to court?
Well, by example, for what we did last Thursday, parties that had, were not in compliance at the time they received a citation, but were in compliance by the time they received in court, I recommended 0 fine. They just paid court costs. And then the parties that were not in compliance and still not in compliance when they came to court, my requested fine was $100, but I made that $100 per household. So like, say, because there were several cases where both owners or both people in control of the property were cited. I didn't go $100 per person. I thought that was gouging a household. I made it the same amount of money for each property, and that was my opinion on how that should be handled. So that's my policy as law director at this time.
Okay, so that would be a $100 fine and $135 for court costs.
Correct.
So it's $235.
Correct.
For that citation. So the warning is clean up your properties and avoid a $235 fine.
Correct.
Or cost.
Yes, and again, if you're not sure on something, ask. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't just running to Facebook to complain about it without asking is not helpful to you. That's all that's my opinion.
Any other questions for the law director? Hearing none, we'll move on to committee reports, Health Service and Safety, Bill Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I'd like to speak to the new council people. For 5 years, I have chaired the Health Service and Safety Committee chair. And I get a report in which I normally, at every council meeting, discuss basically how many problems we'd had that had been reported to us and what the disposition of those were. And I keep a running track of this all the time. And I've got information going back to when I started at this desk. And just to give you an idea of what we do in the way of these various problems that we've had, I took a look at how many citations we did when I first started the desk for a year. And at that time, there were around 500 citations a year for the city of Van Wert. And they remained up, they then dropped in the third year to, or in the 400s. And in the last 2 years, they're down to 200 and, roughly 230 a year that we're getting. Now that says that people were paying attention. And that's good. I think that's a good thing. But the only thing that we look at is the recidivism rate. And there are some that continually, from year to year, have the same situation. Usually junk, trash, things like that, that are really, degrading the area. And it's, a lot of times I get calls from neighbors, and they're not necessarily our people that are going out and finding these. I've had neighbors that will call me and say, look, I got a problem. I've got a situation beside me across the street, and we'll act on it. We would get our people involved and our code enforcement officer. At one time, this city had a full-time code enforcement officer. Now we do not have a code enforcement officer. That role has moved over, and what we're trying to do is determine what best way we can to keep our city clean and neat and tight. And those people that decide that they don't want to really pay attention to what we're doing, they're going to go to court. And I don't think that we're picking on anyone. Mr. Jarrett asked me the last meeting, tell me where the citations are coming from. And if Mr. Jarrett wants to know, I'll give you the percentages of where they come from.
I already have that information. I'm sorry, continue.
You do? For the year?
Not for the year, for the last month.
Oh, well, I'm going to give them to you for the year if you want.
Actually, what I would like is with the names redacted, the addresses of all 257 citations, or warnings for the month of December.
I'm not sure that we'll do that.
I don't think it's,
It might be a public
redacted
record.
is going to be a conflict with any court case.
But identify, if it's redacted, if you know the address, you'll know who the person is by looking it up.
That's not the purpose.
Let's defer the question.
I'll defer the question to the law director.
If you make a written records request, I'll review it, and if I can comply, I will comply.
Okay? So, that concludes my report. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions from the council? Any questions from the gallery?
I want to refine why I wanted to do this, wanted the addresses, because what I do then is I compare them to property values. I was prompted by one person that did help that had a trash issue. I let him top off my dumpster. And the property value was at $44,000. So I wonder how much of this is among, well, let's just say the underprivileged. And I have a suspicion that some of these people are going to need help from the community because they won't be able to do it by themselves. That's my reason. I don't care who the names are. I care about the property values as an indicator of their ability to solve their problem.
Interesting point, Mr.
Yeah.
Jarrett, thank you. Yeah.
An interesting point, I'll let the law director decide that.
Any other questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to economic development. We'll have Councilman Callis introduce Stacy Adams.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am going to turn the floor over to Ms. Stacy Adams.
Thank you very much. Certainly appreciate it, Councilman Callis. I have provided for council a summary of 2021 from an economic development perspective. Welcome to the new council members, and I would tell you at the top of the list, at the very beginning, is really the objectives that were established by the board that governs economic development. And below that, each of those addressed individually with a summary of activity or results for each one of those items. At the end of the report, I also have a comment, contact information and certainly willing to talk to each or any of you that may have questions, recommendations, or suggestions about economic development. But be happy to talk to you about that as you see fit. Secondly, wanted to remind folks we have an entrepreneur fair that we have scheduled for Saturday, February 5th from 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock. It is at the Kenville Group, and it's really intended to provide support for folks that have an interest in starting their own business. We have subject matter experts that participate at the event. So we will have somebody from accounting, finance, insurance, marketing, real estate, an attorney, all providing free of charge advice or guidance to folks that are considering starting their own business. We had great activity 2 years ago. Last year, we did not have the event, so very pleased, especially with all of the downtown revitalization that is anticipated. Certainly here to provide support to those folks that are interested. Again, free of charge, and the mayor has some flyers. If anyone here is interested in that, he can share that here, and he will also make that information available to the public as well. That will be in the office. Yes, sir.
Will that also, I know in the past that included a combination of 4 or 5 workshops to put together a business plan for their ideas. That's still the plan?
Actually, that's a great question. So this event is a partnership between Economic Development, Main Street, and the Chamber of Commerce. We do follow this one-day event with a training event that is, we really are going to walk folks through actually creating a business plan. So they'll go through each step of creating a business plan, again, trying to arm people with the information that they need to successfully start a business. We will have a business plan challenge. So at the end of the training, they will have a business plan that they would be able to go to a bank, for example, and would have a complete business plan finished. The group has a panel of judges that any of those folks that want to enter their business plan, they can enter the contest. There are awards, financial rewards that people can use to help as seed money to start that business as well. So working together in partnership, working together to try and provide as much support as we can for those folks that are considering a new business. Or I would tell you, all those folks that may already have started a business, but they may still have some questions, that they will be able to go to that training, all or pieces of it, depending on what their needs are, to get some help that they need. Any other questions?
I have one, Stacy.
Yes, sir.
What's the financial reward for the winner? There was $2,500 one year? Or?
Yes, $2,500.
So that's pretty good incentive to get to participate in that, yeah. And is there a second prize, third prize, or is that?
There are, but we are actually still fundraising. And so that will depend on what additional, the number of people that participate, number one, and then the funding commitments that we are receiving. But I will tell you, any money that is collected by economic development, every penny of that is a pass-through to those award winners. So
no
all
administrative
of that money,
costs, no administrative.
No administrative costs. That's all going to those folks that are considering starting a business.
Thank you very much. You do a great job with that. Thank you. Any questions, council? Any questions from the gallery? No? Okay, Parks and Recreation, Judy Bauer is not with us this evening. There will be no report from that committee. Finance, Jeff Agler.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have, then and now, it's got to be paid Pension and Associates for $77,571.96. I'd like to make a motion, make it paid.
Second.
Andrew Davis.
Mr. Egger?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
And I've got 3 community reinvestment area agreements I'd like to submit to have prepared. The first one would be, I'd like to have an ordinance that would, for the community reinvestment area between the city of Van Wert and Van Wert Forward LCC, and declare that an emergency.
Second.
Okay.
Mr. Egger?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
The ordinance has been prepared. It's ordinance 22-01-001. I'd like to bring that before council.
Second.
Mr. Egger?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
I'd like to suspend rules. This is an emergency.
Second.
Mr. Egger?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
And pass 01001 on its first and final.
Second.
Mr. Hatcher, any of these need a title change, like add an LLC? Is that this
That's
one?
on 2.
That's on 2.
That's on 2.
Ordinance number 22-01-001. An ordinance approving the community reinvestment area agreement between the city of Van Wert and Van Wert Forward 1 LLC and declaring an emergency. Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
The second ordinance I'd like to have prepared is an ordinance that would approve the agreement between the city of Van Wert and Lee Wert 2 and declaring an emergency.
I'll second that.
Will we make the amendment on that, John?
Well, if it hasn't been prepared yet, then we'll just
We're numbered differently.
Just change it.
Pardon?
02 is MBK LLC.
Oh, it is?
O2, it must be double numbered then. 'cause
Yeah,
I'm
it's
looking at
double
another one.
numbered.
It
It's
is-
double numbered.
Okay, no.
I've got, he sent it to me in my email. and I couldn't pick up on that,
Well,
so I
the
just-
MBK title one says 003, but in the
Oh,
actual
yes.
body it says 002.
Yeah.
Got it.
So I just need to
Okay.
change it on that one.
So we're doing.
So V Word 2
2
is
002.
002.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's,
I think the subject line was different than the ordinance number.
it's saved properly. It wasn't numbered properly in the ordinance box.
Well, it's like we've got the MBK is 002 and the
MBK.
What it says.
Struggling to get to the one we're looking for.
So we need to move ahead with 002.
002 is Van Wert, is V Wert 2
That's how I
LLC.
opened that up with MBK.
Oh, see, there it is,
All right,
right?
Mr. Egler?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr.
It's
Marshall?
saved,
Yes.
it's saved as
Mr.
03, but I
Yes.
didn't
Mrs.
change it
Moore?
when I prepared it.
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
This was prepared on an emergency. I'd like to suspend rules.
We're on
Hold on,
introduce.
we gotta introduce.
Introduce it.
I thought we just did.
That was prepared.
That was prepared.
I'd like to introduce that to council. The ordinance has been prepared. It's ordinance 01002.
Second.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
And this was an emergency, so I'd like to suspend rules.
Second.
Mr. Egger?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
And finally pass 01002 on its first and final.
Second.
Ordinance number 22-01-002. An ordinance approving the community reinvestment area agreement between the city of Van Wert and V Wert 2 LLC and declaring an emergency. Mr. Egger?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
And I'd like to have the law director prepare an ordinance that would approve the community reinvestment area agreement between the city of Van Wert and MBK LLC and declaring an emergency.
Second.
Mr. Egger?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
The ordinance has been prepared. It's ordinance 01003. I'd like to bring that in front of council.
Second.
Mr. Egger?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
This is an emergency, so I'd like to suspend rules.
Second.
Mr. Egger?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
And pass ordinance 01003 on its first and final.
Second.
Mr. Egger? Sorry. Pass. Ordinance number 22-01-003. An ordinance approving the community reinvestment area agreement between the city of Van Wert and MBK LLC and declaring an emergency. Mr. Egger?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
That it, Jeff?
Yeah, that concludes my report. I'm sorry.
You've got another thing on the agenda, Jeff.
There's the airport funding request.
The airport funding is something that was discussed last year, but was never concluded or discussed. So I would like to put that in Finance Committee for their evaluation and recommendations with regard to any additional funding that, subject to the request from the Airport Authority. Okay, Jeff?
Are we going to appoint somebody on that board from,
Well, that's coming. Yeah, that's coming, but I'd like to put the request for financial assistance in your committee,
okay.
okay?
Do we need to schedule a meeting for that?
Well, you know, I don't know whether it's, I think,
We've got till March, don't we?
yeah. Let's wait until next meeting, you come back
Yeah.
with it.
Was that the same issue we talked about before Christmas? with the
Yeah,
airport
with the,
funding?
Yeah.
Okay.
The airport requested $15,000, was it?
Yeah.
To pay for an additional
Part-time employee.
part-time employee, and therein lies a problem, I think, but we'll look for finance to give us some guidance on that. Any other questions from you, Joe?
Just a procedural question. When the chair of a committee is not available, doesn't that question then follow to the vice chair?
Yeah, that would be the way, but right now, Jeff's finance.
I know it had to do with parks. That's all.
Oh, Parks, Judy Bauer. They would go to the vice chair, he would set the meeting up. Is that your question?
No.
For the agenda.
He would present a report.
A committee report. Normally, that'd be the case, but since this is the first meeting,
Okay.
and we have the minutes from the last meeting, and Joe summarized the Parks Committee to a satisfaction of the council, I think we can spare,
Then no report.
yeah, spare that report. Look forward to a report from her next meeting. That's like saying no report, Joe. Okay, so then we'll move on to property and equipment. Dave?
Property and equipment, I have nothing to report this time.
Good. Any questions for Mr. Stennett? Any concerns for him? That's even better. Hearing none? Thank you. And streets and alleys, Ms. Moore.
Well, I have nothing to report, Mr. President.
Okay, very good.
There are two pieces of legislation for streets and alleys.
Oh, there are, yeah.
Yeah, 004 and 005.
Here, this way.
So thank you.
All she'll have to do is do a motion to introduce 004, right?
Correct,
It's not on
yeah.
urgency,
So we need-
And the other one goes all the way.
Actually, it's,
Motion to introduce.
yeah, because they just motion prepare at the last meeting.
Yeah.
We didn't prepare for, or we did?
We did,
yeah.
We just need to introduce this one. So motion to introduce that number.
I have a motion to introduce ordinance number 22-01-004.
That's all I have to say.
Mrs. Moore?
Say yes.
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes. So that'll move to the next meeting.
Do we have any,
And then
we don't have any
need-
discussion on it?
Any discussion on the motion?
Because we'll do the first reading on the
Yeah.
resolutions and ordinances.
Okay.
Can I just real quick update everybody, remind everybody what that one's about? It's an ordinance changing the first parking spot on the north side on Central Avenue, the first spot east of that pedestrian crosswalk, basically in the middle of the block between Washington Street and Market Street. That spot has been requested to be changed to a handicap spot. That is what this legislation is about. This will go through it's not prepared as an emergency, it will go through 3 readings, and then it will have the 30 days to go into effect. Just to remind everybody what that's about.
You might tell them the difference right there when you're talking about that between an emergency legislation going into effect.
Thank you. And for the new members of council, something that's prepared on an emergency is something that it has to, first of all, has to be approved by 2/3 of council, okay, which in this case is 5 votes. And what that does is, when you suspend the rules, I mean, the rules mean you have to have 3 readings, okay? And then if it's prepared as an emergency, what happens is, as soon as it is passed, it can go into effect immediately. If it is not passed as an emergency, then it has to wait 30 days before the mayor can sign it, and it can go into effect. So by passing it as an emergency, you're basically waiving the 30-day wait period. Okay. Any questions on that, Dave?
No, sir.
Okay.
Okay, where were we then?
Mr. Davis?
I saw the introduction or the asking for preparation on this. I don't remember who and why. I remember they asked for it, but not who or why.
The person who requested it?
The foundation asked for it at the request of a business that's right there. That
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I, you know.
It's the request of a business right there on Central Avenue.
Right.
Okay. I see a lot of things requested, but a lot of times we don't have a why.
I don't know the name of the individual who requested it, but it went through the foundation to the Safety Service Director's office.
Okay. Just curiosity.
Not a problem. Not a problem.
Okay. You need to read this?
She has to.
We've got one, yeah, we got one more.
Is 5 the one she has to run through from?
Yeah, we gotta run it all the way through. Yep.
Yeah, 5 is, yeah.
Okay, I would like to make a motion for the law director to prepare an ordinance for the approval of legislation for street construction on Grill Road, Kear Road, and Bonowitz Avenue.
I'll second.
This is, and declaring an emergency.
Declaring an emergency.
I declare an emergency.
That's good.
You're good.
That's not.
Still second.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Egel?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
The law director has prepared an ordinance 22-01-005. I would like to make a motion to introduce this ordinance before the council.
Second.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnen?
Yes.
Since the ordinance was prepared as an emergency, I would like to motion that the statutory rules be suspended. I would like to make a motion that,
It's not there. We gotta do that one first. Second.
Mrs. Moore?
yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes, but a quick question. This is a resolution. Do we need to say resolution or can we use ordinance?
You need to say resolution, because it was prepared as a final resolution. But, I mean, the terms are kind of interchangeable.
Yeah.
So keep going, we're good.
Yeah, you're good.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnen?
Yes.
I would like to make a motion that the ordinance or resolution number 22-01-005 be passed on its first and final reading.
Second.
But before we go any further, I have a question. Jay, would you give us some insight as to what that construction project is?
From Washington Street to the bridge on Bonnewitz is a mill and fill. We're gonna grind an inch and a half off, put an inch and a half back. So where there's curb and gutter, that's gonna remain. From the bridge west all the way to John Brown's gonna be reconstruction where needed, widening, re-sloping the ditches for drainage, and then, of course, paving the whole street from John Brown to Washington.
It gets a lot of heavy traffic through there, so
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
Resolution number 22-01-005. Final resolution for the city of Van Wert to approve legislation for street construction to be completed on Grill Road, Kear Road, and Bonowitz Avenue, to grant the mayor the authority to enter into any agreements with the Department of Transportation in the furtherance of said project and declaring an emergency. Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnen?
Yes.
Okay. Where do we go from here now?
Any questions for her?
Any questions for Mrs. Moore? Hearing none, we'll move on to, who's next on our agenda here? Andrew. Judicial and annexation. Andrew?
Thank you, Mr. President. Also like to welcome the new members of council. Just don't feel like you're falling behind, because it takes a while to get acclimated to everything and understand it. So, other than that, judiciary and annexation has no report this evening.
This is actually pretty quick.
Very good. Any questions for
Yeah.
Mr. Davis? Okay, we'll move on to this one now. 35?
Well, I still got to walk through unfinished business.
Unfinished business, okay. Under unfinished business, this is where I want to bring up the airport authority membership. I'm kind of parochial about that membership on that board. I think it requires that a city member be on the board, as it's a city position we're appointing. Currently, there's a member that's coming off that lives in Convoy, and he's a great aviator, and he's a contributor, but he has difficulty in attending the meetings. His absentee rate is not what we would like to see. So I'm looking for a nomination to that airport authority from within the council.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Bill,
I would nominate Andrew Davis.
got a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Any discussion with regard to that?
Yeah. If he's, it wouldn't be a conflict of interest in being on the finance committee then, what?
I don't see why not. You're getting first-hand information that way.
Should he abstain from funding?
You agree?
Yeah, that shouldn't be an issue.
That's why we're putting him over there, so we can know what's going on.
Maybe perhaps abstain from voting on sending money to the airport authority?
Yes.
Yeah, that might be inappropriate.
But that might be the only,
Yeah, but he can still give feedback, and the council could make a decision based on what he brings to council.
I think that's what we've done in the past. It's usually the member who sits, if there's been a member of council who sat on the board. I remember that specifically with Councilman Fisher. I think he always abstained
Yeah.
when it came up, when that came up. an issue of financing the airport.
Well, but he's on the finance committee.
Well, I understand that, but
Yeah.
but even Councilman Fisher in general, I think he abstained because he's on the board.
Well, understand, Andrew, that as a member of that board, you will bring back information to the council that will be from your best judgment of the situation out there, and then the finance committee will make a decision. You shall abstain from that vote, okay?
Yep.
Okay, so we got the motion, we need a vote on it.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Egley?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett? Yes. Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
I will abstain.
There you go.
We just started off that way.
Okay, additionally, we have unfinished business here of the two other positions. There it is. That would be Woodland Cemetery. Now, Judy Bauer is in Parks and Recreation, and that in essence is a park. Not much recreation going on out there, but people do walk through there.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot.
So I'd ask for a nomination of Judy Bauer to that position, Woodlawn Cemetery Board, replacing Joel Penton for the third year of the three-year term.
I make that motion.
Can we wait until she's here?
No, this is the way committees work.
Just to,
You don't
just to
show up,
make
you
sure
get-
she doesn't have any issues.
Well, if
with
that
it,
comes
or-
up, we'll work on it, but let's get this finished. We can adjust it if we need to. They don't meet very often. I think they meet once a year.
And it's paid. They pay you.
Well, I
Judy
want
might
to
like
switch
that.
mine.
It's like $100 or something, but they pay you.
Judy sold on that one. Okay, we have a motion for Judy Bowers.
I'll second.
That was good.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Egley?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett? Yes. Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
So Judy has been duly railroaded. All right. If she has a problem with it, we'll fix it. Okay, the other board is a replacement for Joy Murphy on the Energy Special Improvement District, ESID Board. Mayor, would you give us some insight on that as to number of meetings and et cetera?
I think it's a once every 6 months.
Gladly pass that off.
The Energy Special Improvement District has a mandatory annual meeting once a year, and then it is really just any time that you would have a project. So my guess would say you may have 2 meetings or so a year would be the norm.
And the example is the lighting on the, one of the examples that came up most recently was lighting on some parking lot, right?
The hospital.
That's the kind of things you do. And that pays, what, $10,000 a year?
It's the same as the
Airport Authority? Okay, so we're looking for a nomination, or maybe we can get a volunteer that would like to be on that board. It's an educational experience, really.
Does it have to be somebody from the city council, or can it be anybody?
It does not have to be a council member.
Okay, I'm just patiently waiting for somebody to say something.
I think Bill looks like he's got some time on his hands over there.
Bill,
Can I nominate Bill Marshall for the ESID, the 1 meeting per year position?
coffee and donuts. All right, we have a motion for Bill.
Yeah.
I'll second that.
All right, any discussion on the motion?
You know there's going to be 5 projects with that next year.
It's going to be 100 projects.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Staying.
Mr. Egley?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett? Yes. Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Okay, Mayor, I think we took care of all 3 of those jobs in a hurry. And we move on to consent agenda.
Nothing there. Yeah, but there's nothing there.
All right, then we go to resolutions and ordinances, third and final reading on ordinance 21-11-065. Judicial.
Okay, so this is coming out of the Judiciary and Annexation Committee, third and final reading for an ordinance to amend Van Wert City Ordinances 11.2, 11.3, 11.4, and 11.5. This is language changing the boundary lines for the wards that we agreed on the last council. Move to pass on third and final.
Jeff.
Ordinance number 21-11-065. An ordinance to amend Van Wert City Ordinances 11.02,
All of them, yes.
11.03,
And then we're done.
11.04, and 11.05.
Just
Goes on each one.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Drew will call out each
Mr.
one.
Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Okay, we have no legislation for a second advisory reading. We'll go on to the consent agenda item. Would you read the ordinances to be approved on the consent agenda?
No, there's no, it's just first reading.
First reading, I'm sorry. Okay. They're all first reading on the consent agenda.
Yeah, but
Okay.
do we need those resolutions that don't have a committee, do those need to be introduced by someone too?
They would need to be, they could, I just think they just need to be, Mr. Egler asked for them to be prepared. So that might just be appropriate for him to ask for them to be, for their first reading.
I'll start with the
Is that okay, Jeff?
Yeah, all three of those were Jeff. Yeah.
Okay, first reading for ordinance number 22-01-004. An ordinance changing the first parking space east of the crosswalk on the north side of the 100 block of East Central Avenue to a handicap parking space. Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
I'd like to introduce ordinance 2201-006, an ordinance that would recognize Joey Murray for her terms of service to the city of Van Wert, declaring an emergency.
Resolution, right?
Yeah, special resolution.
That's a resolution, yes.
Second. If we need, do we need them?
Yeah.
Second, run all the way through? Okay.
Hatcher, did you want to run them all the way through? You said before the meeting that you weren't sure if you...
No, they just first reading. I'd like to get a little more information and maybe discuss it at the next meeting.
Good. So, to introduce Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
And then first reading for resolution number 22-01-006. A special resolution to recognize Joy Murgy for her terms of service to the city of Van Wert, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
And I'd like to introduce resolution number 2201-007, a resolution to recognize Joel Penn for his terms of service to the city of Van Wert, and also declaring an emergency.
I'll second it.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
First reading for resolution number 22-01-007. A special resolution to recognize Joel Penton for his terms of service to the city of Van Wert, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
And I'd like to introduce resolution number 2201-008, resolution to recognize John Tomlinson for his terms of service to the city of Van Wert, and also declaring an emergency.
Second.
Yes. Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
First reading for resolution number 22-01-008, a special resolution to recognize John Tomlinson for his terms of service to the city of Van Wert, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Egler?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
And I'd like to introduce a resolution to recognize Steve Hellman for his terms of service to the city of Van Wert and also declaring an emergency. Ordinance
I'll
22-0009.
second.
Mr. Egger?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
First reading for resolution number 22-01-009. A special resolution to recognize Steve Hellman for his terms of service to the city of Van Wert, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Egger?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Okay. Any further business coming before the council this evening?
Motion to adjourn?
Hold on
Wait.
just a second.
I just want to let all council people know that you are required sometime during your 2-year term to do sunshine law training. Some of you just finished it, but you need to do it again. And I just looked on the Ohio Attorney General's website. They already have 2 virtual webcasts scheduled, one January 26th, one March the 8th. There's something in Avon, at Avon Lake that, a lot of times they have one at Wright State sometime during the term. But you are required to do, it's about a 3-hour training, which, once you do it, you need to submit your certificate to me. So if you want information on that, give me a call or stop in. I can show you how to get registered for the
Martha, how about
webcast.
just send us a copy of that email and,
I can do that.
yeah. The other thing, those that ran for election this year are required to submit their financial disclosure report. So you probably got that in the email. You might want to take care of that right away.
You don't want to get fined.
No,
And they will fine you.
They will fine you,
pretty heavy fine too. It's
considering what the cost to file it, yeah.
It's more expensive than trash.
Way more.
Any other business coming before the panel?
Make a
Hearing
motion
none.
to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn? Second, okay.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Egger?
Yes.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Callis?
Yes.
Mr. Stinnett?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Thank you for your patience.